So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Welcome to the Bruno Kreisky Forum for International Dialogue. I'm very happy to have see you all here this evening at an event curated and moderated by Tobias Matern. And we welcome Parasto Hakim and, of course, also Sara Wahedi, who unfortunately could not join us physically, but she is here with us online. Greetings to London. Thank you. Tobias Matern is going to introduce both of our guests in greater detail to you in a minute, and just let me say that we are happy and very glad that we have this kind of new focus on South Asia. I think this is not only unfortunately timely in the sense that we see rising tensions between India and Pakistan, not only lately, but at least this conflict is now getting more and more to our attention. It is also timely in the sense that it's indeed a region that for so many years, for decades, in the case of Afghanistan, and of course also India and Pakistan, has been, as I would say, very much neglected also, not only media-wise, but also in our educational system and so on and so forth. So this, I think, meets our necessities in getting to know this region and its developments better very, very well. So, of course, having said India and Pakistan, Parasto Hakim, for example, she, coming from Afghanistan, she spent her first years in a refugee camp in Pakistan. That also shows, of course, without going into details, but this might also come up later, which shows all these connections and ways of connections in that region that are going to be tackled. Then let me also say that the particular topic in focusing on the education or the effects of the Taliban regime that came back and that, to put it very bluntly, that the Western powers seem to know so well and to deal with over all these years. So this Taliban regime again shows an element of suppression, especially against women, but of course not only against women, together with technology, as Parasto will also tell us, so online education or using technology for education, keeping or dismantling even a social space for women outside is also a factor besides the aspect of not giving education to women at all. And as US actress Meryl Streep lately has put it, a cat or a squirrel seems to have enjoy more freedom in the public space than women seem to do or have in Afghanistan. So I'm very, very glad to have the two guests, Sara Wahedi and Parasto Hakim, to point out not only the situation in general, but also its relation to education and to the possible support the European Union, others can give in such a situation. And let me also mention at the last point, the Bruno Kreisky Forum seeks cooperation also with the educational director of Vienna, the Wiener Bildungsdirektion, and we are very grateful and glad that we have the opportunity to go with Parasto Hakim to a Viennese gymnasium, a high school, where pupils at the age of 16 to 18 will discuss with Parasto. So the idea of the Bruno Kreisky Forum to bring these excellent and very engaged people we have invited here to a different target group, and especially to young people, to make clear that for a younger generation the importance of education on all levels, and of course also related to your region, is very important. So again, welcome Sara Wahedi, and thank you, and I wish you an interesting evening, and followed here a discussion followed by questions and answers afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sabine. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'm really glad that you came tonight to the Bruno Kreisky Forum. My name is Tobias Matern. I'm of Süddeutsche Zeitung. I will be your moderator tonight. And I'm really glad that you show interest for Afghanistan as opposed to a lot of governments in the West who don't show any interest to Afghanistan anymore. The situation in the home country of Ms. Parasto and Ms. Wahedi is grim, to say the least, since the disastrous withdrawal of the West and the Taliban takeover in 2021. The country has not only gradually disappeared from the spotlight, the Taliban have also gradually and very forcefully actually pushed half of the Afghan population, namely girls and women, out of public life. We are seeing that in the numbers, 2.2 million girls at the age of 12 may not attend school anymore. Work for women is restricted. They may not even travel alone officially anymore. So the question that arises is are we already witnessing the new era of darkness for Afghanistan, as the first Taliban regime was labeled? But before we go too deeply into that, tonight we want to focus on the glimpses of hope, and that is the name of our format tonight. We take a look at light in the darkness. And we do that by focusing on two very extraordinary women whom I'm really pleased and proud to have here in Vienna and on the screen from London, two women who really make a difference. I will start with Ms. Parasto Hakim, sitting to my right. She's a 27-year-old woman who was born, as Sabine already mentioned, in Pakistan in a refugee center. Her family returned to Afghanistan when she was 6 months old, and then she grew up as a child under the first Taliban regime, which ruled the country from 1996 to 2001. Ms. Hakim attended, under the Western presence that started in 2001, school and university in Kabul, and eventually started to work as an Afghan government policy advisor on education, also worked for international NGOs in communications. And after the Taliban regained power, she started an NGO. She didn't immediately leave the country to exile. She started an NGO for girls and women's education. She's an active member of the Vienna process for a democratic Afghanistan, where opposition groups work on a plan for the future of the country. And her tirelessly efforts made Ms. Hakim a nominee for the Sakharov Prize in 2023. Please give a hand to Ms. Parasto Hakim. Welcome to Vienna. And joining us tonight, and this is why I'm heading this way now, joining us tonight from London via video, is Ms. Sara Wahedi. Ms. Wahedi is 30 years old. She is a technologist rather than an entrepreneur. Maybe we'll touch that, why she calls herself a technologist a little bit later. And also a human rights activist. Ms. Wahedi was named one of Time Magazine's Next Generation Leaders and was also on the Forbes Magazine Entrepreneur List 30 under 30. She was born in Kabul in 1995. Her family moved to Canada during the first Taliban regime. And eventually in 2017, Ms. Wahedi returned to Kabul and stayed until the Taliban takeover. Before the Taliban takeover, she was a policy aide at the presidential palace in Kabul and developed the Ehtesab app, which helped users to navigate through security risks. She's now the chief executive officer of Civaam, a civic-tech startup, which develops technological solutions for crisis-affected regions. She holds a degree from Columbia University in New York and now attends, or rather teaches, at Oxford University in London. Thanks for joining us, Sara. Greetings to London. Well, let's get right into it. Ms. Parasto, I would like to start with you. You live in exile, but basically your mind is focused every day, every hour, almost every minute on Afghanistan, where you sort of fight the fight against the darkness. And I think a very good example for that is the NGO that you are running. The name is Srak, which is an Afghan, a Pashto phrase for first light in the morning. And your NGO runs underground schools. Could you please take our audience to one of those schools?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for giving us this opportunity to speak about what's happening actually inside the country. Despite the situation that's going on right now, nobody really understands what's happening. Well, a normal day in the school, secret schools in Afghanistan will be two portions. One is from the side of a girl who is from 11 years old until 18 years old, and every day she will be waking up and she will put on a mask to be invisible, getting out of the house, while her soul is shattering in her body, and just to go few miles away to attend secret schools in the field in Afghanistan. And the same way, I think they still have the pain and disappointments of not being able to go to school and attend actual schools. But at least having a secret school or a place where they are still able to study and not forget what they have been studying before, like their own mothers, as they said, it is giving them a hope for the future. Every day, the school starts at 1 p.m., but the girls will start coming to the school from 11 a.m. in the late morning, just because they feel when they come inside the school, they forget everything that's happening. And when you go to those schools, you will not see that this country is under this darkness and it's going back to 1996 and even beyond that. They will be full of hopes. On the first days, we were giving them like the first 10 core subjects to study, for example, mathematics, physics, and literature. And they were asking me like, this is not enough. And they were like, we want more. And I was like, okay, elaborate. And they were like, we want laptops. We want to go outside. We want to, these girls have the ideas of become like astronauts. They have this in their minds. They want to become teachers. They want to become, like we have Miss Manija Bakhtari. I'm very, very delighted to see her today. They want to become ambassadors. They want to be singers. They want to be artists. And they're like, give us the opportunity because we want to do it. If you want to make the future this way, so let's do it in the secret school. And if you're telling us that, okay, this is our future, so let's do it. Why not? So then we were like, okay, and then we provided them with machines, we provided them with art products and materials. Now they are doing art projects inside the schools, they were doing exhibitions, they were making, and we provided them with laptops and stuff, so they were studying there. And when you go to these secret schools, the yard is like a very a typical Afghan yard, like semi-mud or very mud building. Inside the house, it will be like a little bit dark, but in the eyes of these girls, you will see the hope, and it will give you this thing that you do not want to give up on them, and you want to work. And they're extremely happy, extremely energetic, and while at least they are there, and I saw them there for this past 2 years when I was there, I didn't thought that they are those people that they want to give up on what the Taliban are opposing on them very quickly. So this was giving us, to me, to people like Ms. Manija or to Sara, that we should not give up. What is our excuse to not work? Even if I'm outside the country, we should do it. So that's how the day starts. And for the teachers, like after the Taliban banned the schools for the girls, many teachers lost their jobs because, of course, there were no students to teach. So the teachers were mostly telling us that we feel so like hopeless, and at the same time we feel like we are not effective at all as a human being, because they had talented students, that they were now like forced to be at home and outside of the community and schools. So now they feel that like they are doing something for their people, and every day they're standing on those community-based schools, like secret schools, while the Taliban come very, very often to check on them, and they are fighting against that odds that the Taliban made for them. Yes. So this is how the day starts, and then when they leave, it's really a different chapter, because again, it will be the same, like the way that they have to go through and the fear again, but still they will have this thing in their mind that tomorrow is another day and I will come back to the school. So it's like 4 hours timing for the school, but they spend more than 6 hours in the school because they feel happy and peaceful there.
Right. When I listen to you and hear your enthusiasm, it almost sounds like it's a natural, it's an easy thing to do, but obviously the Taliban banned education, and you sort of mentioned it a little bit. Can you describe the hardships a little bit more? What does that mean, the Taliban sometimes come and pay those schools a visit?
Well, from the second day when the Taliban came to the Afghanistan, I was there, and on the first media coverage of them, or like the media conference briefing of them, the spokesperson of the Taliban were asked from one of the journalists that what about the schools of the girls, and he said the same exact words where they said in 1996 that, oh, we're trying to make an environment according to Sharia law, which is very funny. Like, if they are there, so Sharia law is also there. So why do you think the environment is not enough, good enough for everybody? So they stopped that verbally, but after that, like at the end of 2021, there was a high verdict from the leader of the Taliban banning any kind of institutions and schools for the girls. And in 2022, they did another verdict speaking about it. It was coming from the leader of the Taliban, banning any kind of institutions or like secret schools, like any kind of activities to educate girls and women inside the country, like in Afghanistan, from age of like 10 onwards. Like they can do primary, but after primary, they are not allowed to go to the schools. And any kind of institutions, like they cannot go to tuitions, they cannot go to university, they cannot go to like community-based school even, if their age is like coming after 11 years old. So the challenges is are a lot, because when the leader of the Taliban banned the schools, like of course everybody is against that, because when we were like in schools from 2010, this all things happens, banning women from education. I was in the school in 2010, and the Taliban have poisoned us with a gas, and I lost, not lost, many of my friends lost their health, and they still are like suffering and struggling with their health, and they cannot even breathe as a normal person. That started from then, and till today it go on, and like day by day, months by months, years by years, it became brutal and brutal, and they were sending us like attacks, like suicide bombers inside the schools, and until now that they completely banned. But if we have secret schools, these secret schools are being visited by the Taliban in a way that more than 7 people or 5 people are coming with normal clothing, and they're like, okay, we are from an organization, you should share some information with us. So we are not allowed to do that, but they are showing the cards and stuff, and they go inside the schools. So this is a secretive thing. Maybe I should not say how we are maintaining our security there. Maybe I will talk about it when Afghanistan is free again. But we managed to speak with them in a way to decline that there is a school going on. So I will not go to more details on how we are doing. It is very, very dangerous. It's extremely fearful. I will not say that we are not scared. Right. We're scared to death. Right. But it's the only way. When you go to those enthusiastic people, small children, they're like, we want more. You cannot just say like, okay, just we had a visit from the Taliban, we will stop everything. It will be so, at least for me, it will not be logical to stop just by one visit. So many times it happens that the Taliban came and they didn't lift, like they were standing there for weeks outside the and outside the school, and the girls managed to take the school from the walls to the neighbor's place, so that they can come like by walls to the class.
Yes.
So when you see this energy and this eagerness for education, you don't think about giving up about secret schools. So it is dangerous, yes, but I think that is the meaning of being courage for the girls of Afghanistan too. Even if you're afraid, you have to do what's right for you and what you want.
Right. Well, and you told me before in a conversation we had, you have 15 schools up and running all over the country in several provinces, but you do have a very ambitious goal. How many schools do you eventually want to run?
I can say millions, but that might not be very. It might be very ideal situation for me. But right now we are trying to open 35 more schools on the first day of Jawza, which is our month, which is like in 10 days. We are going to start our new 35 more schools. Collectively, it will be 35 schools. Mm-hmm. But my ideal thinking that I'm still working on, because there are teachers coming to us and they're asking for help, and they are ready to voluntarily help their own students. It might be like 2,000 schools. 2,000 schools. Yes. Very soon, maybe till the end of this year, we will make 2,000 schools. And it's all possible because of the girls are ready to fight this, and the teachers are ready to stand there in front of the Taliban and do this. So who am I to stop them?
Well, listening to you, it's encouraging, and I think it's a story of empowerment that you are telling, and that takes us to you, Sara, takes us to London. As a technologist, I think your whole work also focuses on empowerment. Can you take us a little bit into your world of technology and your aspirations and hopes to bring about change to Afghanistan and women and girls in Afghanistan?
Thank you very much, Tobias, and thank you to the Kreisky Forum for having me, and to speak alongside Parasto, who is such an inspiration, the work that she does. In terms of the work that I do, similar to Parasto, it is very much underground. I went from having a very public-facing platform, which was the Ehtesab app, and that was really what catapulted our work as the first civic-tech company and startup in Afghanistan. But that came with a price, and that's exactly why it's so important to keep the schools that Parasto runs secret, because what happens is that eventually the Taliban does crack down on any sort of innovation in the country. And that was why we made the difficult decision to not only shut down the app, because it got to the point where, although we had vacated our office in downtown Kabul, the new renters who had no affiliation with us were being arrested, who were being detained, reached out to me and said, you are really ruining our lives because of the work that you've done, and you need to do something, because we are getting arrested every day and we have no affiliation with you. And that was a really daunting realization for me, which was that in order for me to do the work that I want to do, I have to do it underground. So with Civaam, the new startup that we lead, it is completely underground. So the hit that we've taken is that we can't speak to the media about the work that we do. Of course, in a platform like this, I can speak indirectly to some of the work that we do, which is primarily covert, informal pathways to healthcare, to gender-based violence care, to immediate emergency care, hopefully facilitating access to schools like Parasto's, because our job and our interest is not to provide online education, but it's to provide easier mechanisms to reach underground education. And the reason for that is all of us in this room have experienced coronavirus. All of us experienced what it felt like to work from home, to go to school from home. And what we learned from that is that we wanted even more so to return to in-person classes. In no context, are the schools in Austria or the schools here in England completely online. It is a completely unprecedented, unnatural way of learning. And that's exactly why so many of us push for the fact that this cannot be normalized. The work that we do in technology is to facilitate access to schools like Parasto's, but in no means do we want online education to become the norm? I don't think anyone in this room would have easily allowed the Taliban to return if we had said, you know, by 2025, in 4 years, Afghan girls will not have been going to school for 4 years. I really, truly believe that the international community would have stopped what has happened today. Because in no way, shape, or form do I think the world actually believed that the Taliban would and stay on track with their former regime. And the fact that this has become completely normalized. So, you know, the work of technologists in Afghanistan is quite difficult because although we can work covertly, it is actually easy to track us. So we are managing a team within the country, but unfortunately, the Taliban does have robust surveillance. So it is quite difficult to continue the work that we do in a way that is covert and that can't be tracked, especially due to low technology. So Afghanistan doesn't have the same type of infrastructure as we can find in Europe or the UK. So it's something that we do day to day. AI is facilitating in a lot of different ways, and I'll speak on that later on about the specific types of projects that we're working on. But it's really quite difficult. And the last thing I'll say is, you know, what the technology that works in Silicon Valley or in, you know, the kind of upper echelons of technology in Europe, they don't translate in Afghanistan. And that's why I'm so passionate about technologists from crisis regions building the technology that they use, because I've seen many you know, brilliant analysts and advisors and consultants who come from, you know, the big 4 consulting firms in Afghanistan, but they don't own the technology that they build. They don't own the consulting that they do. And that's why a lot of these foreign interventions fail, because if you're going to come from Berlin or Frankfurt or London or New York to build something and consult on technology, you don't really feel like it's something you're going to use. So another thing we've been able to show is that we can build technology for lower cost and something that's more sustainable. And I think that that's why we've been able to scale and build the trust of the global public or the global citizenry over the last 5 years.
I think that's what you mentioned is sort of, in a nutshell, you pointed at a lot of problems that the Western intervention in Afghanistan had, you know, coming with a different perspective and not being able to sort of sense the cultural and the needs of the people and completely grasp what was necessary for Afghanistan. What I really like about both of your testimonies is sort of that you change the narrative from my perspective. I think here in the West we sometimes have this kind of condescending type of view about Afghan women, about Afghan girls, and we describe them as victims. And when I listen to you, it doesn't appear to me that they are victims, and I think you have a completely different definition of, or a different sort of flashpoint, what Afghan girls and women are going through. You wouldn't call them victims, I believe.
Of course, I will not call them victims. This is the last thing that you can look at the eyes of those girls who are eager to study, and every day they just take their heads in their hands and just walk in front of the Taliban, while for them having a book or notebook is kind of like a terrorist activity here. Mm-hmm. And they go to the schools and they study every day, and the women are teaching voluntarily in this harsh economical situation, and the security is like bizarre situation. I think they already know what is happening to them and they choose what they want to do. I would not call them victims at all cost. I think they are people who are more beyond courageous, but I guess the victim might be the world, because at least the world does not know by supporting the Taliban and their narratives and giving them time what is going to happen to them. We already know what happened to us, and we found the ways, and we're fighting for it, and we are going beyond that, and we chase our dreams, but the world doesn't even have any idea what is going to come to them. Mm-hmm. Every day they wake up while the Taliban are like banning one like humanitarian basic rights from Afghan women and people. The more the world is eager to speak with them.
Right.
I don't say don't speak with them. This is what we do. This is what makes us different from the Taliban. They kill, we speak. But the point is here that giving them credits, for example, giving them embassies, inviting them to European countries with special VIP treatment, giving them offices in many countries. And in the same time, in the last plan of the UNAMA in Afghanistan, they have even accepted some of the conditions that the Taliban put, which was like releasing the freezed money of Afghanistan, which is the Afghanistan's money. It's not the Taliban, it's for the people. Yesterday I was reading a note, just to add a note on this one. Yesterday I was reading a report of WFP World Food Programme in Afghanistan. More than 23 million people do not know where their next meal is coming from. So this is the money of those people, which if you give to the Taliban, of course it will not reach them. And the second thing was to legitimize the government of the Taliban and recognize them as a political legitimate government, which is, on my view, which is like a very funny thing, which the World UNAMA is saying that we are going to accept this so that they can at least open the schools. The Taliban do not believe on an educated woman, because an educated woman will not marry a Taliban. She will not tell their children to become a Taliban. She will not allow their family members to think like the Taliban. The Taliban are destroyers. A destroying mind will never have the thoughts of building something or changing something for better. So that's why it's not in their idea, it's not in their head to make something beautiful. It's just like destroying, because that's how they have been acting for the past 20 years. So they will never allow women to go to school. This is the thing that I'm going to guarantee. But the world, while they work this way and they function this way, I think they are more victim, not the Afghan people, especially not the Afghan women and girls.
Well, I think major parts of the world are turning a blind eye on the situation in Afghanistan. Sara, is it difficult for you to still keep up the awareness, or do you have open doors? Do you find open doors when you come up with ideas how to improve the situation for people in Afghanistan?
Well, similar to, the points that Parasto has brought up, it's very difficult to have constructive conversations about Afghanistan because it for many people in the Western world, it feels quite exhausting. And the thing that's, I guess, most painful about that is that I believe that those who were engaged in the Doha Agreement or the Doha talks really failed in terms of having the majority of the Afghan population, 70% of the population, which were youth, to be a part of these discussions. And what we faced is that although we are perhaps the majority of those who are trying to bring around change in the country, many of us were not, part of those conversations. So one of the most frustrating things, and I'm going to be very blunt, is, one of the reasons why I've kind of stepped away from a lot of this public awareness is the people that continue to engage on Afghanistan are not really working on productive solutions. There are people like Parasto who are managing in an extremely, complicated and complex way underground schools or so many other campaigns, but we really need to move past the shadows of the past in Afghanistan and work with those who are doing brilliant work in many different sectors, and to really tap into that, because, we're able to show that there is a way to continue providing services and to support Afghan women and girls in Afghanistan, but it's not going to achieve much if we're not going to move past old dialogue. And these new roundtables need to include people who are doing brilliant work. And when I see a lot of these engagements, I don't see that that's happening. I see that we're just repeating a lot of the narratives that we have been for quite some time. And it's quite refreshing to see this forum, for example, because we really need to build some sort of cohesion to be able to support Afghan women and girls. And similar to what was said before, most of the women and girls that I speak to are incredibly efficient with their time. I mean, they're looking for any way to return to work, to return to school in unorthodox ways, because they don't see themselves as as victims whatsoever. But there's a sense of frustration because it's saying, I'm here and I have the willingness to do something with my time. I just had a brother who is based in Germany reach out to me, and his two sisters are in high school, and he said, they're learning Duolingo, they're accessing all these online services, they're trying their best, but what can happen at actually concrete level? Because I want to make sure that my sisters are getting a world-class education, that these online schools that they're attending is going to be acknowledged by the German government. So for example, if my sisters finish school, will they actually be able to attend school abroad? So these types of conversations are not happening right now. And the work that we need to do now, especially for those of like yourself who have this kind of influence, is to tap into the work that's happening and to scale that, and to figure out how to work within the current parameters. Of course, there's people like the current, I think it's the Vienna conference, who are trying to work on different types of grassroots movements. But until that happens, a lot of the important work that happens needs to scale, because there really is no other way. It has to come from the country itself.
Is that where you see the main part of your mission, so to speak, giving a voice to the ones who don't have it anymore because the international spotlight, the European spotlight, the American spotlight has turned somewhere else and has forgotten about Afghanistan?
Well, I mean, before I was quite vocal about this, but the current Trump administration has made it very difficult for people like myself to continue to speak out. I mean, right now, obviously, there's different contexts in which a lot of silencing is happening, but for someone like myself who was and is based in the United States, I've had to really think critically about how much I'm willing to put myself at risk, because if I, for example, get doxxed, then I can't do the work that I am doing. So, for example, I have partners that I work with, like Apple or Google or many other companies, and a lot of them don't want to be engaging in a lot of political conversation. So it's really unfortunate, because as much as I'm trying to elevate and figure out a strategic way to raise my voice, especially, and elevating voices like Parasto's and so many others, is that there is actually a movement going on that is spreading across the world, that people don't really want to hear things that involve women's rights or women's freedoms. And it's something that is unprecedented. So I'm trying to maneuver it as best I can. But I think right now my focus has been to find these Afghan women and girls within the country and to figure out how to elevate their voices. So a lot of the tweeting or a lot of the social media work that I do is actually finding women in the country and saying, if you have this platform, what kind of message can I elevate for you? And that's what I've been focusing on in the last few.
The lives that the two of you are living are not lives by choice. I think you were drawn into a situation. Both of you had to leave Afghanistan. Sara, you talked publicly about the trauma that you observed watching your mother, because she also had to leave Afghanistan under the first Taliban regime. Now we see politically, and in terms of what is happening in the society, history repeating itself in Afghanistan. Is for you also, in a way, history with those family roots that you were describing and the observations you were making, history repeating itself?
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. I mean, my mom left Afghanistan in the late 90s, and she was incredibly traumatized by what she had seen. She was a teacher at Kabul University, an incredibly brilliant woman. Actually came to Paris for a couple of months, and she told me that this is where she wanted to eventually visit, not to leave the country, but she had a dream to travel the world. And similar to 2021, my mom was ousted alongside her three sisters from their different types of work. My aunt was a chemist in the Polytechnique university in Afghanistan, which just, brilliant women who are leading amazing work, trying to rebuild the country after the civil war in the early 90s. And when I told my mom that I wanted to return in 2017, it really ruptured our relationship, because my mom had said, I left the country so you could have a new life. And I don't understand why you want to return. It was incredibly traumatic for her. And also to see my mom, how she maneuvered not only leaving the country, but also having a severed marriage to my father, who also had very similar types of beliefs So, not only was it a state destruction for her, but it was also familial, and how deeply misogynistic this kind of permeated within her country, but also within her personal family. So I was raised by a single mother, and that kind of mentality is one which is why I'm so passionate about speaking out about it, is that this is not something that just kind of showed up from somewhere. We have been loud and clear since, I was tweeting in 2018, 2019 about talks of the early agreement, and I had said, without a doubt, you can retweet me, you can find my tweets. I have said that the Taliban will return to their first regime. They had absolutely no interest in changing. And in terms of, the trauma, yes, in some ways that is true. I think the way that I've been able to change it now is technology. For example, in my work, Parasto is education. For me, I've been able to use it as a catalyst. And I think that is a way that I've been able to kind of maneuver that trauma, is to show my mother and show similar women who lived in the first regime that we actually have a chance to support our women instead of all of us kind of collectively suffering. So women like myself, like Parasto, so many others who are leading important work have the agency as leaders to do so. So that's, I guess, one of the ways that we're trying to change the cycle of trauma.
Parasto, after the Taliban takeover, you actually decided to stay in Afghanistan. Why?
Because that was my country. And in 2021, when I already made the school in December, we made these secret schools. We started it in September 2021.
So that's a couple of months after the takeover. That was
Just
August. And then
15 days after the Taliban, like 1 month after the Taliban came, we made our first school. And I had a visit from one of the French journalists. He wanted to know how the women are receiving the verdicts of the Taliban and ban on education. So he told me that you have to leave the country. And very eagerly I say, like, I will never leave the country no matter what will happen.
What are you thinking about?
Sometimes I think about it now and I'm like, what will this person think about me when he see me, like I'm outside the country? So the position that I was in on that time, I was like a breadwinner for my family, and which was like family of 8 members, including me. And I never had this thought with myself that one day this thing will happen. Yes, after the Doha deal in 2021, we knew something is going to happen very, very badly, but I didn't have any option for myself.
Maybe we should briefly say to the people in the audience who don't know about the Doha deal, that was the Trump administration, the first Trump administration, who tried to find a diplomatic solution, but it was basically, well, throwing the Afghan government in front of a bus and giving like confirmation to the Taliban and handing basically the country to the Taliban on a silver platter.
Yes, these negotiations started in 2013, and it was like one-sided, more like they were speaking with the Taliban. They give diplomatic status for the Taliban. They give an office for them in Qatar. They were speaking with them, but the government didn't had so much veto to speak about whatever is going on until they did the deal in 2021, which till today we do not know what was inside that deal, which we are like the victim of. So when I was like in Afghanistan, we have planned our whole life there. We didn't thought about leaving the country, perhaps going for studies, but coming back to the country, because that was the place that we wanted to be, and all our values started and ended there. But slowly, after all these incidents happened and the threats, it was very, very miraculous and very shocking for me that only because I was a teacher, I was receiving these many threats. What about other people who are doing more and more? Because we had so many people, for example, Sara here, we have so many other people who are working as an activist in small or bigger roles. There was a person, his name was Matiula Wisa. He was working for education for 14 years, even before the Taliban came, and he's making schools. But in March in 2023, he was detained by the Taliban for more than 9 months. He was in the detention center of the Taliban. Nobody knows where he is, and even his mother did not have the right to meet him. So I was thinking that if they are receiving me this way, what will happen to other people who is doing bigger mission? And I didn't want to leave the country because I didn't have a plan, and my all plans started and ended to be in Afghanistan. And if today somebody give me the news that the Taliban will be gone tomorrow, maybe I will book my ticket back to Afghanistan. Right. Because that is where I want to be. No offense to where I am now, but I really, really think that that is a place where I feel more effective and right. more happy too as well. And of course there is my favorite food as well, so I can't leave that too. It's very difficult to find it here.
Yeah, that's always, of course, Afghan food. You have to eat it in Kabul or in exactly. Mazar. That's different than exactly. eating it here. But what I find so interesting, you were telling me that before in an interview that we had, it was not for the work of the underground schools that they threatened your life. They came for a different reason. Can you take our audience to that night that they knocked and came to your house? 2023?
Yes, in 2023, after very many small threats that I was receiving from the Taliban in my call and so many other ways, in a very beautiful afternoon, I was walking in PD3, which is the Darlaman area. Maybe Sara and Madam Manija will know this. It's a beautiful area. It's in the center of Kabul. We were walking. I was with my brother, and I had a baggy jeans, probably like that, but like you could see, like very small portion of the jeans out of the big veil that I had, and the jeans was visible. So I was stopped by the Taliban, and it was like the beginning of the evening, so we did not have so many people on the streets, and there were two people, and one of them was like around 40 years old or 45, mm-hmm. and he had a big Kalashnikov on his shoulder, and the other one was so small, he was like 16 years old guy, and they both stopped us, and he took my brother away from me, and me and brother, we both of us look very similar to each other, so I don't know what they were thinking. So they took him away and asked a few questions from them, and then they came to me and asked a few questions from me to make sure that if he is my brother or not. And then he asked us to sit on the ground on our knees, which was too much dramatic to be true. I have seen so many documentaries of the way the Taliban were working and ISIS were working, but it was actually happening to me, and I was in the center of that position. And I sat on the ground, and they asked us to put our hands on the back of our necks, and my brother was like few feet away from me, but because in that afternoon I forced him to go with me, I couldn't even look at my brother because I was thinking that if anything happened to this guy, he's favorite child of my mother, by the way. What will I say to my mom? This was in my head. And I thought I'm not scared that much, but I saw that my scarf was like shaking very badly. Sure. And I was like, okay, I'm so scared. And then for more than like 45 minutes, this guy, the 40 years old man, the Taliban gunman, he was giving me a lecture on the street while I was on my knees, and he was standing in front of me on how to be a good woman, on how I should have...
Of all people, he was giving you that lecture.
Of all people. Mm-hmm. At least if you were a woman, I would say like, okay, she knows something, but he was a man. And he was telling me I should have a veil and only my two eyes should be visible because this is how woman should protect herself from who? From him.
From him. Mm-hmm.
And I should, like, I have the genes, which is something that the people in the West are promoting, and they are doing it so that we be deceived and go on the wrong path. So many very, very, sorry to say, but foolish reasons to be there. And at that point, he was like, and at this point you're walking, why are you walking? And I was like, I didn't knew that walking was forbidden too. And he was like very angry to my response, and he said like, and you're talking too, I'm ashamed that you're a Pashtun. So Pashtun is this tribe where mostly the Taliban are coming from that place, and he was like, I'm very surprised that you are a Pashtun woman, because a Pashtun woman is not so shameless like you. They are so full of shame, and we call it haya and stuff. So then he was like, when I said that I didn't knew that walking on the street is forbidden, he came towards me and he put the gun on my head, and then he like to make it like emphasized that, did you even hear what I say to you, like in all these lectures, so-called. So then I didn't say anything. I was completely out of sight, and I was blank. I didn't know what to say. Like, I didn't, like, what you should say. I say, like, okay, sir, again, you will be like, they will shoot. So it was the first time I saw myself in a position like that. But my brother was like begging him, like, please do not do that. And he was like not crying, but he was in that state. But I couldn't even look at him because I had this, you know, the fear of my mother. So then the small guy who was 17 years old, he came next to him and he took him from here and take him away. And then he spoke with him, like they were both whispering, and it was my life that was discussed in whispers. About. Yes, two men were discussing my whole faith and my whole life. And then this man, he was like smiling again, and I don't know what he said. I would like to ask him, what did he say to him? And then he came back to us and say, like, this time I will leave you, he told me, and he looked at my brother and then say, like, if anywhere in the world I see you again with this outfit, I swear to God, I will kill you, I'll shoot you with this Kalashnikov that he had, with this one. And he tapped on it. And I said, like, okay, of course. So then we walked very slowly because it was too good to be true. And then to make us, like, I don't know, to have an influence on us, they did 2 fire on the air. I was so scared. And then after that, I was thinking with myself, it was 2023, that they just stopped me because of my clothing this way. What if they find out what I do? Right. The coolest thing.
That you're challenging them.
Yes. Wow. So, that was the moment of realization for me, that when the journalist told me, like, you have to leave. Right. I thought like I was living in a bubble, and what the people are telling me was right. So that was the time where I was like, okay, I have to think about something, an option to have. But it was already too late, and I received a call from one of the international organizations who were like, I was working with them, and they told me that I was under watch of the Taliban and I have to leave immediately. Because just 1 week before that, they have bombed one of our cars that I was going to work with. And I didn't thought it might be the Taliban because it was public transportation, but taking us to. So they said it was particularly because of me, and I was so shocked. Like, I was nobody, and I was not even that standing as Afghan women were standing on the streets in front of them and asking for their rights as protesting.
So it takes them very little to be afraid of you.
Yes, exactly. So I was like, I was in a very moment of shock, and overnight I had to leave, and all I had to take was few clothes and scarves that I loved, and of course my books, because I was sure the place that I'm going to, I will not be able to find books in Persian. And I was a very big introvert, to mention this, and all I was doing was reading books in Afghanistan when I was there. So this was the moment that I had to choose between my books which one I want to take. So it was very bad, but at the end I had a full bag of books that I brought to Europe with myself, and overnight my whole life changed just because of that one incident.
Right. Sara, it was the same for you. Basically, I mean, you weren't threatened how Parasto described it, but also you had to change course. Your life had to completely change, and you had to leave Afghanistan. By preparing for this, I found a quote when someone asked you before, what does it mean for you to be Afghan? What did it do to your identity to make those experiences? You said, being Afghan has given me the most resilient and stubborn personality. Can you explain us a little bit the stubbornness and the resilience?
Yeah, I guess the stubbornness comes from the very entrepreneurial background that Afghans have. I mean, one thing that I always found very interesting in Afghanistan is the amount of, shoe shiners and small, vegetable farmers or sellers, vegetable sellers, fruit sellers, little stores that pop up all over the streets, much more than any other city that I've ever been to. And it says we have an entrepreneurial nature in Afghanistan. The reason for that is that we are so used to building and rebuilding and reconstructing, and that's just a part of our ethos, a part of the way that we have been able to maneuver the trauma that we experience, is that we can build and we can maneuver when we have literally nothing. So for me, being Afghan, for example, Ehtesab, closing it was incredibly traumatic for me because it was a 5-year startup. It was a 5-year app that I had been running with my team. But Civaam, was something that just kind of came naturally next. And if I were to close Civaam, I'm sure that I would be working on something else. Yeah. And it can be exhausting, but it just goes to show that, we want to continue building, and that's what we continue to do. And also, I think in German, you'll say, I think it's called Sprach- und Rollenwechsel, but we do code switching. So being Afghan also means that I feel much more pressure to, be a very upstanding citizen globally, to show that we are more than women, who are, for example, suffering or who are victims. We constantly, myself, for example, I constantly feel like I have to be smarter, be better at communicative, because I feel the pressure of the women from my country who have been defined as women who are suffering, and that is not what they are doing. Like I said, I have women reaching out all the time. For example, right now in my field, it's women who've been computer scientists, currently studying technology, women who are learning how to code online and saying, I'm willing to do anything. Can you please just give me something to do because I want to give back? So yes. Being Afghan is a journey of building and collapsing and reconstructing, but it's something that we do to continue the work that we love.
So that reflection of who you are or where you come from is constantly with you, I sense.
Absolutely.
Constantly on your mind.
Oh, of course.
And there's no escape, or?
No, I mean, obviously, for people who maybe hear my voice on the phone or who have met me, being Canadian also is something that is very important to me. I've also lived in Germany for a few years, so having that German component. My father still lives in Hamburg and has been there for about 20 years. So being from these different types of areas is also quite defining for me, but at the end of the day, being Canadian, I guess it doesn't impact me or hasn't defined me as much, because I feel like Canada doesn't really need me. I think that, if someone were to be a policy advisor, someone in Canada, and then, they pass away or God forbid they retire, you just kind of have someone else pop up. But Afghanistan, right, don't have that privilege. Once a great leader passes away, you have a huge, gap. So for me, I feel the responsibility of giving back to my country of origin, but also maintaining my Canadian roots and values, which is one of democracy and freedom and fundamental human rights.
Yeah, Afghanistan needs you. I think that's something to underline with the important work that you do. I see a certain pattern when it comes to personality, if I may say. The stubbornness, I think, is also part of your identity, because you say, one of your quotes is, if the Taliban close one school, I will open 10 new ones. So I guess that is brave and stubborn at the same time.
I think it's more about where we were. Our whole life has been bound with war. When I first started creating the first school, we were not only focusing on the girls. Like at first, yes, I was only asking for, I was going to the houses in the community and we were collecting girls to come to our schools. But then, like, each day I was seeing that the women, the mothers of the children are coming to our schools with their children. And I saw, like, we had a small class where half of more than, like, the people that we wanted, the girls, the women were in the class. And I was like, we have to do something about it. So when I took them to another class and we spoke with them, and they say, like, we want to learn, because they were the victim of the Taliban ban on education in 1996, and afterwards they have been forced for marriages. They have very dark stories to share, and one of the biggest reasons that they give us for education, the eagerness that they wanted to learn, was that their family members, like particularly their husbands, fathers, has told them that if an attack happens, you should be able to read the addresses to find me. Mm-hmm. If an attack happens, you should be able to read the numbers to call an ambulance or call me to come and help you. Mm-hmm. Even education is a very a different thing from politics and war. And I think it should be, in any situation, it should be out of all these phenomena that the world politicians are making. But even the normal thing in the life of a person which is getting educated was bound with war. So I think this stubbornness, which you can call, or maybe the resilience, the Afghan woman, like we have in ourselves, was this, that no matter what happened, I have to make it happen. And this comes as the biggest example, these students and these teachers that we have. Many of us, like our schools, have been attacked by the Taliban many mm-hmm. times. And the next day, on the chairs that we lost our best friends, we were continuing our journey. Mm-hmm. It was like some documentaries of World War, like if you watch it, it's something like that. No matter who you lose, you have to keep going. So yeah. I think it's coming, I might call it resilience and the spirit of going and doing everything, and courageousness that we have. No matter what happens, you have to keep going, because that's how life is. You cannot stop just because something happens. So I will call it this way. Okay. I think it might be better for me too.
Good. Well, let's for a moment, let's step out of the reality of Afghanistan. Let's do a short role play. Let's assume world leaders gather and they want change for Afghanistan, and they invite the two of you and ask for your advice. And they ask you, Sara, how can we help to bring about change in Afghanistan? What will you tell them?
In terms of any further aid or any sort of money that is flowing into the country, that extremely strict benchmarks need to be in place. Also to remove any sort of travel capacity for the Taliban. There are many Talibs who are currently able to travel without any sort of restriction, and that needs to go back into place. Also sanctions and restrictions on any sort of country that is engaging with the Taliban. I think Qatar, for example, is a country that has been able to maneuver a lot of these kinds of economic sanctions with the Taliban. We see multi-million-dollar tech projects, mineral projects, infrastructure projects led by China that are continuing to grow. There are a lot of infrastructure projects coming in from Central Asia. A lot of countries are engaging with a regime that is showing very clearly that it is furthering human rights violations, fundamental human rights violations. And so there are ways to circumvent this, but bringing in pressure to countries that are engaging with the Taliban. I would really focus on the economic components, because there was a recent Bloomberg report that talked about business as usual with the Taliban, and that needs to change. Also, in terms of women's involvement, the recent Doha talks that have been organized by UNIMA have not been, they haven't been illustrative of those within the country or outside of the country who are actually doing impactful work. It seems like the same type of players that have been involved in the last 2 or 3 years. So the international community, world leaders need to do a better job as to understanding how have grassroots leaders been able to circumvent the Taliban. Who are the grassroots leaders? Who are the ones who are really bringing about change? How do we listen to their sentiments and bring them to the table? I would focus, I think, on these 3 points.
How about you, if they come and ask?
I think this is a very big question, and it might take hours for me to speak about it, but to make it very summarized, when we lost our country when, in 15th August onwards until today, there is no human rights article that have not been violated in Afghanistan. But still, when we stand in front of the politicians, the world leaders who are deciding for our faith and our country, they are telling us at least there is peace in the country. Mm-hmm. I would sincerely ask them to know this point and note this, that peace is not equal with freedom. And the peace that you are defining to us, do you want the same for yourself? And many things happened, many things have been violated by the Taliban, and every time they have been saying the same thing, that at least there is peace. What do you expect? They kill each other. Mm-hmm. Of course they will not. What they wanted, you have given them, and even more. So as an educator, maybe if I reflect on this, is bring back the honorable position of human rights declaration. Because I might be telling my students in Afghanistan that human rights is like this and like that, but the way the world is acting, it is just a bunch of words, and they're like, excuse me, this is not happening. Right. Bring back the position of education as it was, away from politics, away from war and anything else, in a way that a book, a notebook, a pen, a student, and a teacher should not be a target, as a terrorist is targeted. Mm-hmm. See us as human beings the way it is, and do not take decision for us if you have not been in our shoes. Right. So they have, like, we know that they are getting ready for another, like, Doha talks, but they are not even considering Afghan people to be like the opposition of the Taliban, who are humanitarian workers or politicians who want freedom in Afghanistan, not only peace. They have been excluded only to give the chance to the Taliban. Right. I would like them to, if you want to be justful, listen to both sides, because yes, we are the reality, the Taliban are not.
Very true, yes. Well, we have only time for one last question, and as we called it Light in the Darkness, our talk tonight, Afghanistan has seen 5 decades of instability, insecurity, wars, but still I think you are 2 extraordinary examples that there is some hope. Sara, what would you say? What are the steps, even little ones, in Afghanistan that make you hopeful?
The youth are brilliant, outstanding. I mean, they're going online, figuring out how to go to, gatherings and get together and trying to continue life. I mean, the women that work on our team, who are primarily technologists, whether they're software engineers or data analysts or researchers, they continue to push back on the regime, whether it's trying to access the market in the day, or whether they try to get some sweets or try to meet with their friends. They take that risk every day to take back their agency. And like I said, it's really just about finding robust ways to support the work that they do, the activism that they do, the protests that they engage with on a daily basis, is to figure out how can we support that. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, with me, compared to other activists or those who work in similar types of causes, for me, technology sometimes blurs that boundary for me. I'm able to build and work and prototype, and for example, we're working on a brilliant pilot right now to provide informal access to healthcare across 3 provinces we started with, but we just got approved for 15 in the next year. It's that, these are all led by women. These are all led by women who are taking risks, who will jump off the phone and say, I think I'm being surveilled right now, I'll come back soon. Just incredibly resilient women, and with very little, that they're given, they're able to do so much. So imagine if we were able to provide more agency, more robust support, like I said, all benchmark based. Like if I was able to work as a humanitarian agency, I would say, look at the benchmarks, start with small pilots, stop with these lump sum amounts of money, start building trust within these agencies, within these NGOs, and let them show us they're able to scale on their own, and we've been able to do that. So the youth inspire me. They are 74% of the population. All we need to do is to support their work. And the mission that I have taken on is how to scale, positive, equitable, and brilliant work that's happening on the ground. And I use that with technology, but it's really the youth. And the fundamental thing I would say is that if we don't want Afghanistan to spiral out of control and to become this hub of terrorism, which a lot of reports are showing that, especially with what's happening in India and Pakistan, ISIS-K, internal strife within the Taliban, education is incredibly paramount. And to do everything we can, education, innovations in education, whatever it needs to be, this generation, I mean, we're looking at 30 million youth needs to continue their education. And how we do that, whether it's through secret schools, underground schools, or through online education, that needs to continue. That is incredibly imperative to the stability of the region, to be honest.
Parasto, what gives you hope when you look at your country?
Inside, I might categorize it inside and outside Afghanistan, because I'm in both places now. Inside the country, it's all Afghan brave men who are standing and fighting against the Taliban every day, not even have their basic needs on the mountains, and they stood there for the people, and they are protecting at least the peace and freedom, and they're fighting for freedom of the country. All these people, amazing people like Matiullah Wisa, the teachers, the volunteer teachers, the organizations, the girls themselves, they give me hope. On the first days when the Taliban banned the schools for the second time, mind you, the Taliban closed the schools, and then next year they say like we will start it, which was in March 21st. The girls went to the schools, and after like 1 hour they say like, okay, ban the schools again. The situation of women girls were so much like bad, they were so much traumatized. So to get out of that position for girls, because many of them wanted to commit suicide, we had very few staff who were like psychological experts, and we could not go to everywhere. So we had this idea that we give diaries for our children, for our girls in the schools, so that they can write what they're going through and what happened to them, like who are they, what are they thinking and feeling. They wrote marvelous stories, and it's full of hopes, even in the peak of ending their lives. And now I'm collecting those stories, and I want to make a book out of it, which is almost completed. And when I was reading those books after I came out of Afghanistan, every night I was writing them and to translate it again, and it was giving me this hope that I am nobody to stop these girls, and I have to do something. And outside of the country, it's people like Sara, it's people like Miss Manija, it's all those people that hold on to the democratic, the humanitarian values. So many women who are working for gender apartheid to be recognized and by the world that's happening in Afghanistan. And of course, the teams that we have, that they're working on a option to replace the Taliban. We have people like front lines that they are fighting inside the country actively, and there are other groups that they are working on making plans as a legitimate government peacefully to just replace the Taliban. There are women like Fawzia Kofi. She have given all her life and efforts to fight for freedom and for a free Afghanistan. This is what makes us hopeful for the future, and I think it will give us a result as we want, and we will see a free Afghanistan. And of course, I will be back to Afghanistan and have my Afghan food.
This is what we hope that you will have that soon.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Sara Wahedi, and thank you very much, Parasto Hakim. I wouldn't be surprised if in the future we can say that here tonight in Vienna we talk to the Ministers of Education and the Minister of Technology. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.